Hello, this is David from DN Cognitive Counseling. Tonight we got a response, a pretty extensive response from Jennifer. So first off, Jennifer, I want to say thank you very much for writing your response and taking your time to do that. And I'm going to treat your response with the seriousness and the attention it deserves. So this is what Jennifer writes. First, I want to say I am so sorry what happened to that person. I'm glad they finally took action and hope they found the strength in healing. That is exactly what I hope that everybody will do. Take action that leads them to find strength in healing. So thank you very much, Jennifer, for acknowledging that. Jennifer writes, again, my hope is that anyone who felt or feels violated, should always be comfortable speaking out. And I agree, we should definitely teach people it is okay to speak out. Again, this is not what Jennifer wrote, but I'm going to respond. It's incredibly important, Jennifer, that we do help people to understand they have to be comfortable. And the only way that people are going to be comfortable is recognizing their power and what they can do. A lot of reason why people don't is because they feel shame and they feel like they played a role or somehow they deserved what happened. And it's factually absolutely false. We've put a lot of shame and guilt on the victim throughout the years, throughout history, which has caused people to systematically always feel they did something wrong. So it is imperative that we understand and empower people to step up and speak out when they've been the victim. Jennifer goes on. My point was that people should not conduct themselves in such a way that would make someone feel uncomfortable. That's when I was referring to the protocols of behavior codes of conduct. I was referring to the Bidens as not the victims who are taught from the day we are hired that touching is inappropriate, hugging is inappropriate, racist comments are inappropriate, off-color jokes are inappropriate. To me, it doesn't matter if one finds it funny or another person doesn't. It's included in that specifically noted in the codes of conduct. It's inappropriate in the workplace. But I'm a goody-goody, and I like rules, like knowing what I can and what I shouldn't do. Jennifer, I don't know if I could not agree with you more. I think it would be absolutely wonderful if everybody followed rules and followed rules to the extent that they were. I also agree with you in the sense that I really wish that nobody would do anything to make anybody else feel uncomfortable. But is that realistic? I don't disagree with the mindset that that's what you'd love to see. If I were to go and talk to people in jail, would have said, you know, the best part is that people follow laws and people didn't hurt other people. Or for people who molested people, it's never appropriate to molest somebody. It's not okay to steal from people. It's not okay to murder. But the reality is these things happen. And the question is, what do you do then? Do I report? Do I not report? Do I stand up for myself? Or do I let things go? And this gets very gray when it comes to a lot of these things, including, by the way, these codes of conduct, which, of course, everybody would agree certain things are absolutely wrong, and I think that's fine. But there's also a lot of gray that goes on where people feel a certain way. I will share with you many years ago, there was somebody I was working with, and we were brought together in a room, and she was talking about nothing sexualized, but she felt that something I said was hurtful to her. And I said, very much I appreciate that. You telling me, because I wouldn't have known otherwise. And there was no intent, no aspect of that that I thought could have been. But she decided to take it anyway that way. And then later on, the supervisor said to me, I wouldn't have seen it that way either, and I don't think that's what was meant. But some people are more sensitive than others, and we have to be wary of that. And it's true. But there was no way possible objectively to have known that a statement of that nature would be. I'll give you an example of this. If somebody makes a political statement, you're going to affect or offend or hurt other people. And it doesn't make a difference which side you're on. Somebody makes a statement about politics, or somebody makes a statement about what's in the news. It could be offensive to certain people who have a different point of view. Or a statement that somebody makes about even a story that takes place in the news could be hurtful to certain people. It gets very, very complex, but you're correct in the sense that what happened with the touching and all these types of things would be inappropriate. But the nature by which these things take place, they do. So I wish we lived in a world where they never took place. So Jennifer goes on. Once you're in a personal relationship with someone at work, the rules change because it's a different relationship. I'm referring to colleagues. Well, Jennifer, the problem with that standard now is creates a different problem, which of course is people get into relationships at work all the time. People date other people. People ask each other out. And work relationships do happen. Jennifer continues to write, I always worked in a very strict environment where if you conducted yourself in a manner specifically prohibited by the code of conduct, you were let go. There was a zero tolerance policy. I'm also disturbingly compartmentalized, so maybe I can separate the situations differently than most. Not better, just different. Jennifer, I'm going to say to you that you're absolutely correct, because there have been a lot of these situations where there have been relationships that people entered in consensually, and then when the relationships broke up, people have utilized the code of conduct as a means of hurting the person that they felt hurt with in the relationship. And that's where a lot of these problems come up as well. That there is a vindictive nature sometimes in using the code of conduct for something that was a beginning consensually, and then utilizing it later when things went awry. And again, this happens in both directions, and that's why the companies do what they do in order to protect themselves legally. But we're not talking about here only the legal aspects in terms of losing a job or not losing a job, or how the company relates to these types of things. We're talking about it in terms of what do you do when something bad happens to you. And I think that's where I was going in more than the aspect of the top-down aspect of how a company should react or relate. Because you're right, the company is always going to be looking for not what's correct or what happens, but basically to get out of liability. Jennifer goes on, I'm going to share with you a story. I was at a job where one of my employees was making comments that made me very uncomfortable. But while it made me uncomfortable, I didn't think it crossed the line. Which line? I'm not sure. Now I'm going to stop here for a second because I think, Jennifer, you're stating exactly the nuance and the problem of a situation. And I very much appreciate you pointing this out because this is very important. Here you have a situation where somebody's making a comment. You're uncomfortable, but you're not even sure if it crossed the line. And that's exactly what I was referring to earlier. You go on. I tolerate it, but fearing it would get worse, I saved all the voice messages and instant messages, which, by the way, was very smart. Jennifer goes on. After a while, they told my boss what was happening and asked him what to do about it, but I didn't want to officially report it because I didn't want to get this person in trouble. This went on probably 3 months. One morning, I came into work and there was a voicemail on my machine marked private. That was frighteningly disturbing. I felt like it had to be, I had to officially go to my boss, who brought me to HR. They told me I had a very high tolerance for inappropriate behavior and could not believe I tolerated it for so long and didn't say anything. P.S. The fact that he marked the message private before sending it indicated to me he knew how inappropriate it was. Also, I told him to stop several times. I never said he made me uncomfortable, but I did ask him to stop. And he would say things like, you're married and you shouldn't be saying things like that. He made comments about walking me to Penn Station and doing something inappropriate. And my reply was something to the effect, only if you were to go home with one less finger, and then you showed, and one less finger that you showed up to work with. So, Jennifer, I think you're speaking about something here that's very incredibly important. And again, it's very, very helpful to so many people because so many people go through this. You talked about the idea there should be zero tolerance, zero aspects. You brought out this like really strong effort about why you think nobody should have to do this. And then you talked about yourself doing it, where your HR department is saying to you, whoa, you have a really high tolerance for this. You should have reported this much earlier. And maybe you should have. But the aspect was you yourself you were not sure. It was gray for you. And that's what I'm saying. When you finally felt it crossed the line, you did stand up for yourself, which was good. And again, I'm glad it only stayed in words. Because a lot of people don't stand up even after actions. And that's where things really cross a line to criminal behavior as opposed to inappropriate work environment. And I think that that's a very important aspect to understand about these things. It's easier said, we have a zero tolerance for this. It's very easy to say that. But in practicality, it's a lot more difficult to actually play out. And yourself, who has this standard, who's wrote about, well, there should be. And by the way, I hate that word, should. Shoulds don't exist. It's what is. You know, I should have been a Kardashian, right? I should have been born with a silver spoon in my mouth. I should have been born rich. I should have a lot of things. Should have a full head of hair. But I don't. And those shoulds go out the window. The question is, what is? What is the situation? How to deal with that? You'll do much better in your life understanding what is and what you can do than what should be. But again, I think what you're sharing here is incredibly important. And again, thank you. And then you go on. In my opinion, I made it clear that his comments were not welcome or appropriate, but apparently he did not get the message or he didn't care. I'm not sure which. Maybe that's my fault. Maybe that colors my opinion. But I feel like I should never have been put in that position. Had he obeyed the rules, I wouldn't have been uncomfortable, and he wouldn't have been fired. Well, Jennifer, he should have been fired. And the reality was you did stand up for yourself. You told me you didn't welcome them. He didn't care about your message. He didn't care about listening. And you escalated it, which was the correct thing to do. I'm going to tell you, had you not escalated it and had you kept quiet, it would have gotten much worse. And that's what's important to understand. Because look at it from the predator's point of view. The predator pushes a boundary and you don't say anything. And then the predator pushes the boundary further and you don't say anything. And then the predator pushes the boundary further and you don't say anything. The predator thinks he has free rein, which is the reason why it's so important to say something immediately. Had you reported the first incident and said to your HR department, I find this inappropriate, it may have stopped at that point. Now, the truth is, being fired might have been the better result for you in this particular situation. But supposing you would have said something the first time and brought it to HR, do you think there would have been a second? Do you think there would have been that private call, the private message? The reason why it escalates, because this is why it's so important to understand, why it's so important to report, why it's so important to bring things to light. When you escalate these things right away, they don't go anywhere else. You go on and write, it's entirely possible I'm a weirdo and no one feels the same way but me. No, you're not a weirdo. Work is work and personal is personal, regardless of the relationship with the people you work with. When we are in the office, we are expected to conduct ourselves professionally. No questions, no exceptions. There were lots of people in the office who were married to each other in the office, but it was still professional. If you don't know they were married, you wouldn't know it by looking at them. P.S. I worked mostly in a law firm, so maybe that is why I'm strict on the rest of corporate America, because we know all too well it is easy to be sued. Thank you for responding so quickly and thoroughly. Well, Jennifer, you're very, very welcome for my response. But my response here is not just for you and for me. It's for everybody else who has gone through something similar. Sadly, so many people have. And the reality is, you yourself did. Even in this law firm with this great policy, you were still put into a situation where there was escalation. You didn't even realize it was happening and why he had to be fired to that extent. Again, had it been by the report by the first time that this was inappropriate, then that would be much, much better. I tell people all the time when I run groups, if I ever say anything that offends you or something that hurts you, please tell me. Now, most of the time it doesn't happen, but every once in a while, somebody will say, this bothered me because, and then we talk about it. More often than not, the person starts to realize there's something that they're sensitive about to begin with, and they just were rubbed the wrong way because of it, even though it was a benign comment having nothing to do with them. Talking about people that suffer with addiction, and you say, well, people that suffer with addiction generally have more financial problems than people that don't. Now, that's just a statement of fact. But that doesn't change the fact that people can get offended by it. DWIs, people that drive drunk are more likely to kill people. Okay, that's just a statement of fact. But the sad part is the recognition isn't there. I had a client said something in a group the other night that was absolutely brilliant. He says, when I was using, I didn't always get in trouble. But every time I got in trouble, I was using. And I thought it was a really intelligent statement. And again, for the standpoint of a person to understand that that's not a disparaging statement against anybody, but the reality is to recognize those realities. And for some people, the denial is so great they don't want to recognize anything. In your own story, Jennifer, you were talking about this grayness that went on for you. And that's exactly what I was referring to. So if you were to come to me that first time and said, David, this comment was made, and I'm a little bit uncomfortable about it, I would have said, go to HR. And then you would have given me all the reasons why you didn't think that was necessary. In which case, he doesn't learn his lesson and then escalates. So I hope that was helpful. Again, I really appreciate the response and your thoughtful response. If you have any other questions, please feel free to ask. If anybody else has any other questions about this, please feel free to respond. Any comments, make it below. If you like this video, hit like. If you didn't, or you have an issue about anything I said, please put it in the comment section. If you'd like to support the channel, please go to Subcribe-star. The link is below. And I wish you a good night and good mental health. Bye.